Our next movie is named Wired, and this is inspired by the life and death of John Belushi, who became the most popular comic actor of his generation and then died of a sordid drug overdose. Belushi's life and death inspired a best-selling book by Watergate journalist Bob Woodward, and the movie is based on the book, although it takes a lot of liberties with Woodward's reporting approach, including the weird plot idea that Belushi's ghost is going to be taken back on a journey through his own life by an angel of death played by Ray Sharkey.
I remember you played a coke addict. Yeah. You was a funny guy, man. You was a funny guy. But you died in the end.
Sort of like the Ghost of Christmas Past. Belushi and his friend and partner Dan Aykroyd are portrayed in the movie by Michael Chiklis and Gary Grooms, who have a real handicap. Since we all remember so well what they were like, any imitation seems unconvincing. The movie even has a character based on Bob Woodward of the Washington Post, who interviews Belushi's wife, Judy, played by Lucinda Jenney.
He had a life pattern of binges, and not just drugs, and everything. He went through this Napoleonic period, bought all these books on Napoleon, started doing Napoleon, talking in his sleep, just obsessed with Napoleon.
And there were all the unhappy details of Belushi's death in this interview with the last person to see him alive.
He was alive when I left him this morning.
Are you into heroin or anything?
No. I was into heroin for a while.
That is Patty Darbanville playing Kathy Smith, who administered Belushi's fatal drug overdose. And Darbanville is effective in the role, but in fact, all of the actors in this movie are more or less at sea because the screenplay is so bizarre. How did they ever get the idea of using two different and contradictory devices to tell the same story? While the Woodward character does his reporting on a realistic level, the Angel of Death is taking poor John Belushi on a tour through his life that, like I said before, it almost seems like an assignment for the Ghost of Christmas Past. You figure it out. I kept waiting for Woodward to meet the Angel of Death. Do you remember that story? A famous journalism story when Bob Considine 50, 60 years ago, went down to cover the Johnson City flood, and he sent back a story saying, God stood on a mountaintop here and looked at what his floodwaters had wrought. And his editor sent him a cable and said, forget flood, interview God. Right. With this movie, I kept expecting Ben Bradley of the Washington Post to send Woodward a cable saying, forget Belushi, interview Angel of Death.
It's very difficult to pull off that revisiting your life conceit in a film. It's really hard, and it's particularly hard when you're dealing with a contemporary film, when that is such an out there kind of historical thing, like you said with Dickens. So I don't think that that works, and that was probably a bad decision. At the same time, when I watched the picture, I didn't get bored, because it's an important life, and what happened to his life is obviously quite relevant to the times that we live in. I just wish that Bob Fosse, the late great director, were alive, because he could have made this story really well. The guy who made Star 80, this was a story made for him, and it isn't well done.
There obviously could be a good movie based on the life of John Belushi. They have wasted an opportunity here, and the irony is that Woodward was participated in the making of this film, and his book, Wired, was a very good piece of reporting, but the movie, it seems to me, is just, it's almost as if they threw anything they could think of into the screenplay to see what would work and what wouldn't.
I want to differ with you on one point. I thought that the two guys that played Belushi and Aykroyd were very good in what they had to do, and I wasn't offended by watching the portrayal. The mannerisms of Aykroyd's character, this is Gary Groove, absolutely dead on.
They did what they could do.
Yes.
But isn't the problem that these people are so current in your mind that no matter what these people do, you know that it's not?
I think these two actors could have pulled it off with a better script and direction. 2
thumbs down for Wired, the story of the life and death of John Belushi. It was undercut by a weird script and uncertain direction, but Gene liked it a little more than I did.